All right, so let's take a look at a slightly more complex example, but it perhaps might make a little more sense. It actually does something other than just say hello. So let's create a really simple counter. Presumably we'll have the state that will keep track of the current value of the counter, and the two events that we care about, or maybe three, is we want to count up, we want to count down, and maybe we want to reset the counter, right? Okay. So let's implement that. So first of all, let's create an application. So let's go here and let's go to webdev and 2019 summer 1, and let's just create a really trivial. So create. Oh wait, nvm. What version? Okay, so I'm latest Node.js. So I'm going to do a create React app and simple React counter. React Redux counter. Okay, so that's going to install the boilerplate React template application, and we're going to have to add both the Redux module, and we'll have to add the Redux React module as well, right? So let's see. We'll need to install Redux and React Redux. Okay, so we need to go into that directory. So simple. Once we're here, we can npm install Redux. Don't forget to do a -- save. So it's going to download from node package manager.org the Redux library. We'll also now need to install as well the React Redux library. It's taking a while. Let's see if we have an example of this. We're going to start with we're going to blow away our index. We'll start from scratch, and we'll create a small counter, right? A counter component that will have the current value of the counter, a plus button, and a minus button, right? Okay, and it's going to have an initial attribute, a property that's going to be the value of the counter. It's going to have an initial value of 0, right? If somebody doesn't pass the value, then we will assume that it's 0 unless somebody else passes it as an argument. Okay, it's still going. What we'll do is that when we render it, right, it'll render just like this, the current value. We'll render the 2 buttons, and that we would like to be able to do is generate an on-click on both buttons and verify that they're bound. Right, we'll start off with a simple alert plus and minus. Let's see if it's done. Okay, it's done. All right, so let's install the other library. We need React Redux. So npm install React Redux -- save. So that's I think this is a smaller library. It shouldn't take us long. And meanwhile, I'm going to open up the project. We'll say open, and we'll be, let's see, under webdev. Oops, webdev 19 summer 1, and there it is, our counter. So let me open that up. Is it done? It is. Did it open? Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. So let's create our first component, right? Our counter component. I'm going to just follow my cheat sheet over here. I'm going to grab my counter component, and I'm going to put it under a directory called components, and it'll be counter. So new counter.js. I'm going to paste that in there. So this is a stateless component. We still need to import a couple of things here. So we say import React from React. And what else do we need to do? We need to export this. So this will be export default, the counter. Okay, awesome. So once we have this from our app.js, we can blow away most of our content here and just return our new stateless component. Right, so this will be something like counter. Right, we'll need to import that. So import counter from counter from components counter. Okay? And we can now run this npm start. So that will transpile all our JSX into JavaScript so that most browsers can read it. Right? And it will start off at the root, which will be that 0 and the plus and the minus. Everybody good? Right? So let's start binding some event handlers here. If we go down to the counter, we can bind here on this button. We can say, on click. So if there's an on click, we can have a function embedded in here that says that we're going to say alert plus, right? And we can have a similar here that says that if we say an on click, it will be an anonymous function that will say alert and then say minus. Okay? So if we reload this and we say plus, it says plus, or if we click minus, it says minus. Everybody good? Everybody still with me? Excellent. But we don't really want to do that. What we would like to be able to do, right, is instead, well, there's two ways, right? We can have the outside world pass us the dispatch, and we can call it directly from here, or we can declare the event handlers and have a mapper handle this. We'll take this. This is slightly simpler since we don't have to do the second mapper, the second dispatch mapper. All right, here we're being passed dispatch right as an argument, meaning we're being our own dispatcher. This is not as kosher as ideal, but it's slightly easier to follow along. So somebody is going to pass us, right? It's going to pass us here the dispatch here, right? I'm sorry. Which one? This one. It's part of the slides. I'm following the slides verbatim. Okay, it's this one, right? It's this slide number 7. And so what we're going to do here is that notice that we are going to generate a JSON object that's going to represent the action object that we want to send over to a reducer. Yes? Right? We want to call the dispatch function who's going to send this action to the reducer. So let's do that. Let's grab that dispatch. Right? So instead of doing this, right, we're going to just call dispatch type plus, and the same thing here with minus. Okay, so presumably this is what is going to be sent over to the mythical reducer in a minute or so. All right, everybody still with me? And somehow the new state should come back to me as either 1, 2, 3, 4, or going down 3, 2, 1, 0, and whatnot. Yes, all right, through the value. All right, excellent. Let's create our reducer. Let's see. It's a good practice to put all reducers under a directory called reducers. And we will put this inside of a file called counter-reducer.js, or maybe just counter. Counter is just fine. Okay. It's oftentimes a good practice just to give it a straight single word that represents kind of the model, right, of what the value is of the data that we are manipulating. Let's see. Remember that the reducer is just a function, right, that takes 2 arguments. it has an initial state, right? It has the state object, and it has the action object. Now here we're using ES6 syntax that allows us to initialize a parameter, right? If nobody passes us a parameter, we can take an initial value for that parameter, right? So we're saying that if nobody passes us a state object, right, a value for it, I'm going to initialize it with a value equal to 0, right? Because that's the default value of my state, and here's my function. In my function, I just have a switch. The switch is going to compare the type that is coming in. Is going to compare it against multiple cases, right? Either plus or so it's going to return this, or it's going to return case minus, right? It's going to do an alert minus here, minus. Okay. I have an extra colon here, and it's going to do it's going to return what? It's going to return this JSON object. The next state that's going to generate is an object that is going to maintain the current state of the value, and it'll be whatever it used to be incremented by 1, or the new value, if it's minus, it'll be whatever the original value was decremented by 1, right? And a default, right? If it's not plus, if it's not minus, then I'm just going to return whatever the original state was. So I'm just going to return the state. So if there was no event that I know of that made me change state, I'm just going to return the old state, right? So there were no changes in the state. Yes? Make sense? And where the initial state is the value equal to 0, this value is what eventually I want to make it into the counter. This value, I want to map this value in the state. I want to map it to this property in the component. I want to do the mapping. Yes, I'm going to need to do some kind of mapping in there. Yes? All right. All right. Let's see. What else do we need to do here? All right. So once we do that, we did the minus. We need the plus. We need the default. Now we're going to have to start gluing things together. All right. So what we're going to do is that we're going to here's my container. Here's my container. I did not put it in a separate file. Right. Let's go back to app. Let's go back to app. I'm going to need a couple things. I'm going to need my provider from React Redux. Right. I'm going to need my, I guess we'll need a connect as well. I'm going to need connect. I forget, where's connect? Connect, I think it's also from Redux, isn't it? React Redux? So probably connect, no, it doesn't see it. Connect maybe? Connect, oh, there it is. What else do we need? Probably we need a store. The store, where is the store? From Redux, probably. From Redux. Okay. We'll also need probably the create store. Create store, there it is. What else do we need? I think that's it. So what we need to do is we need the reducer. Let's grab the reducer. It's the counter reducer. Counter. From where? From let's go into the reducers, and here's our counter. There's our reducer. All right, so we can start connecting things together. Right? We'll need a store. We create a store, so we will do const store using the create store with the reducer. There's a store. Right? const store. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I don't need that from here. Sorry. I create the store. There it is. And now error parsing identify store has already been declared. Where? Store. Am I missing something? Store const create store. Const store. Can you see store anywhere else? No. What are you complaining? Is the store being created elsewhere? Not in the reducer, is it? I'm not creating here. Counter, I'm not creating the store here. Hover. Parsing identifier store has already been declared. 7. Import counter from reducers counter. Const store. So presumably it's in here. There is no store here. Probably I need to export this as well. Default counter. Okay, yeah, I was missing the reducer, the counter. I was not exporting it. It was complaining that I cannot use it. All right, so now that I have the store, I can provide it. So provider, and the store will be our store. Okay. But as I mentioned earlier, we can't use this counter anymore. We can't use that counter. We need to wrap it inside of a container, right? The container will be the one who pushes down the state down to the component, right? So let's do that. Let's do a connect here. We'll say we'll do a const counter container. Right, will be use the connect, right? That will connect a state, a mapper, which we don't yet have, to the counter here, right? And this is what we're going to be rendering. Okay, here's where we need to do the mapping. We need to do the mapping of the state that is generated by the store. Right, we want to map it to whatever the counter is expecting. The counter is expecting a value, right? It's expecting a value. So the mapping should happen here in a mapper. Do we have a mapper here? Yeah, we have a mapper here. Let's see, state mapper. Right, so right here, instead of creating our own state, our own function. This is our function. This is an anonymous function that's going to take whatever the state is, and it's going to look at the value in that state, and it's going to map it into a property that the container is expecting. Okay, let's see. All right, so a better way to do it. So there's a better way is to encapsulate this whole thing, to encapsulate it into a function, right? Call it the const state to property mapper. Right, and this is much more kosher state that will return a JSON object, and this will be the JSON object. So I'm gonna take all this thing, I'm gonna put it here, and then I can pass in a whole function here as opposed to just being anonymous. Yeah, this is much more kosher. Okay. All right, let's see. Let's try it out now. Let's see if we broke it. Failed. Oh, no. React Redux does not contain a default provide imported as provider. Am I missing a parenthesis somewhere? Like that? Yeah. There we go. There we go. So it's 0. It's not doing much right now. But if we go into our counter, we can initialize the state to be 10, right? And so it's 10. So we are receiving the state from the reducer. The reducer is generating that state for us, right? And it's trickling down, right? So the counter is generating this value. Because it's none of these, it's not plus, it's not minus, it's returning the initial state over here. Yes? Okay? That is flowing its way into, let's see, it was flowing its way into the store, right? The store is flowing its way through the provider into the container. From the container, we're calling this function with the current state that has the value equal to 10. Yes? That 10 in here is being mapped into a property called value that gets mapped into the counter whose property is indeed, whose counter here, whose property is indeed value, right? That right now is no longer 0, right? We're actually providing a value, right? And this is rendered as 10. Yes? Very convoluted. Okay? You know, lots of twists and turns. Well, actually, not too many twists and turns. It's a pretty straight shot, right? It goes from container. I mean, from reducer. From reducer, right? From reducer to store, from store to container, from container to mapper, and from mapper to property. Yes, right? Now let's go the other way around, where the component is going to notify folks that I am generating a plus or minus, plus or minus. We have to notify that. Yes? Okay, so let's do that. So the counter here is generating this dispatch. Oh, it's already dispatching. Oh, it's already connected, probably. Let's see. Plus. Oh, yeah, it's already connected. Never mind. Yeah, the thing is that we took a shortcut here, right? We took a shortcut. Because of this connect over here, because of this connect, right? This connect. Notice that we're not passing that second dispatcher that we looked at earlier. So basically, it's just passing down to the counter. It's passing the dispatcher directly, so that the counter can call the dispatcher itself, right? That's not right, right? That's not the way it should be done. Let's do it right. Ideally, what should happen is that instead, we pass the following. We pass a plus and a minus, right, as event handlers, okay? As event handlers. And these clicks, instead of calling dispatcher themselves, they would call these event handlers. It says, you deal with it. I'm not dealing with this, right? You deal with it. I'm just calling you and letting you know that somebody called that somebody clicked on this. Yeah? Okay, I'm just going to paste it here for convenience. And this too. I'm just going to put it here for convenience. And this is minus. So as far as the component is concerned, I have absolutely no idea how this gets to the provider or the connect or the store or anything like that. And it shouldn't. You know, it should not be aware of anything from outside. You know, it's very self-contained. Yes? That's the beauty of making it very easy to test. Because I can always inject whatever I want for my plus and the minus. And I can always inject whatever value I want to verify that this component is working correctly. Make sense? Right? Right, so having done that, here I do need a mapper that says I want to map the dispatcher to property mapper. And here's my dispatcher. Right? And here's what I am going to map. What am I receiving here? I have two properties, plus and minus. Right? So this will have two things. It will have a plus. Right? We'll call some function. And another one is minus. We'll call another function. Okay? Right? And what will they call? Well, they will call dispatcher right, will invoke, it's this what we wrote out, right, all this. Let's copy it, right, will be this, right, and then the minus. Do I have an extra curly bracket somewhere? Oh, dispatcher. There we go. Yes? Right? So there's the mapper. And now we can provide the mapper as the second argument to this. Right? And then we can refresh this, and it still works the same. Yes? Right? Make sense? Yes. Yep. Here. Yeah, exactly. Right. So instead, so I don't need it anymore here, right? I don't need it anymore because it's bad practice. Right? Although you can, right? Just to do some demo and getting it to work, it's fine. But the best practice is to provide, an actual set of event handlers that you can hook up to that are not specifically tied to the fact that we're using Redux. Right? If I put a dispatcher there, then I am tied to Redux. Yes? Instead, if I have these generic event handlers, I can instead just inject inside from some test harness, right? That is not specific to Redux. Okay, like Jest or something like that. Right? Make sense? Right? Now, yes.
So just for clarification, basically you have a normal component, and this component will have some sort of click handler. Instead of handling it directly there, you have event handlers passing its parameters.
Yes.
And you delegate it to them.
Exactly.
And then you have to wrap that around with a container, which you use with Connect. And Connect will have a mapper and then that component. And then the mapper does the mapping, and then you render the wrapped container.
Yep.
Okay.
Very good. Excellent. Yeah, and so you have to you'll be able to just spit it out like that. Yes, right. And again, until you don't do it and break it and make it wrong and try to do it yourself multiple times, right? It will not become apparent, right? You have to practice it. Again, the plumbing is the hardest part, right? Connecting these things together. It says, well, this goes to that and that goes to that and this goes to that, and then always all the way back over here. Yes, right. So you have to practice it several times to get it right. All right. The only other thing perhaps is that our container, my reducer has all these alerts that I don't really need it. So I can now do plus 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 or minus minus minus, and that works fine. There we go. Maybe add just one more that resets the value. How about that? Let's do that. Let's say we have in our counter, we add another button. Right, we add another button that says on click. We say reset, and we say reset, and we're going to pass that as an event handler. Again, notice how simple now my component becomes. Yes, I'm not responsible for anything. I just display and I notify people. That's all I do. Right? It's very, very trivial. Instead, that's being delegated to other folks who are going to be responsible for that. So I'm now generating a different event handler, and the dispatcher will notify the reducer. So dispatcher, and the type will be reset. Okay. Notice I don't really need the curly brackets here. I don't really need the curly brackets because, right, I don't really have multiple lines. If I have multiple lines, then yes, I need the curly brackets. So now this is going to go out to the reducer, right? So the reducer is going to now have a separate case, right? If it's reset, then the new state will be that the value should be 0. Yes? Okay, so if we run it and we call it reset, it sets it to 0. Everybody good? Does that make sense? Yes. The app here. I'm sorry, say again. The store is where all these states are being stored, right? And it maintains the current state plus a history of all the states that have been generated by the reducer. So the reducer responsibility is to calculate the next state based on the previous state and the events, right? Whereas the store maintains all this in a stack, right? That you can then pop off and says, okay, well, I want to, go back and forth in various state that have been generated over time. Okay. All right, excellent. So everything else, right? Everything else is consists of prettying this up, all right? Making this a little bit more readable, putting them in separate files. Yes. Perhaps following some naming conventions, maybe some best practices, right? But to the extent this is as far as what Redux is, right? That's all Redux is, right? Everything else is just, making some best practices and whatnot. So let's take a look at some of these. Okay.